Well, hello and welcome to OverDeVest Nurseries. We're here in the display area. This is where we test and trial out quite a few of our plants. It's a beautiful morning in midsummer. It's a fairly toasty day. The temperatures are into the 90s, but in a way that's appropriate because today I'm going to show you a few things that you can do with your lavenders, and they love it sunny with nice warm temperatures. Now, the lavenders that we grow in our gardens come from the Mediterranean. They're called English lavenders, not because they come from England, it's just that they were very popular and grew very well there too. But really the varieties that we grow come from places like eastern side of Spain, southeastern France, the northern and western part of Italy, and into Croatia too. They grow in rocky calcareous soils where there's next to no nutrient but lots of free draining limestone soil and of course lots of sun. Now we're growing two ones here. This is Lavandula hidcote, a short compact English lavender, and then we have a hybrid. This is Lavandula phenomenal, which is a taller, stronger growing variety. Both of them have been absolutely gorgeous in the earlier part of the summer. Started flowering in early summer and have continued for weeks, brought in lots of bees and pollinating insects and butterflies too, and of course lots of wonderful fragrance that wafted in the air. And as you see, they've still got one or two little bits of flower on the tips of the shoots, but they're pretty well finished, and at this stage there's one or two jobs that I want to show you so that you can get the best from your lavenders. And one of those jobs is now at this time of year to go in and trim off the old flowering stems to encourage a nice bushy compact growing plant that will then regrow and give us a second round of flowering this year. Here's how you do it. Now what you're going to need is a good sharp pair of pruners, or perhaps hedging shears. This is what I like to use. But before we get into actually doing it, I'd like to remind you that it's very important that we clean our tools. We do this here on the nursery simply as a matter of course. We use some alcohol, we spray it along the blades of the pruning machines and then just clean it off a little bit. And one of the things about this is that it's important because that helps to prevent diseases and the spread of things like viruses. Just do it occasionally and that'll help to keep your tools nice and clean and in good order, and your plants in better order too. And then it's just a matter of going in with your pruners and snipping off these old flowering stems. I gather together a little bunch like so, and then go in, and as you see, I'm taking a little bit of the young growth off the top of the plant as well. Just trimming them back so that it will be nice and bushy and it'll produce plenty of young fresh growth that will then lead up to making plenty of growth and renewed flower stems. Now, one of the important things about cutting lavenders back is that you try to keep it nice and juvenile, plenty of young fresh growth on it. Now, the leaves on this throughout most of our region are going to be evergreen, so making a nice lush rounded compact plant like this will obviously give you plenty of interest during the winter time as well as during the summer. But now at this time of year, as you see, the flowers have gone over, but look at the tips here. It's growing out and making new growth, and that's why when you trim it back you take off some of that young growth too, because that encourages it to branch from lower down, and that'll make a nice tight compact cushion of foliage. And that's why it's important that you try to trim them back as soon as possible after they finish flowering. You'll find then that if you do this every year, you will encourage lots of young juvenile growth that will come from the base of the plant it will be nice and vigorous, obviously producing lots of growth and in turn lots of flowers, and you'll have a lovely canopy of foliage down here. Now the one thing about lavenders is that they do not sprout well from the old brown wood down in here. So keep to the young, fresh, juvenile growth at the top. That keeps them vigorous. And if you do this on an annual basis, you'll find then that you'll have lots of young, fresh, compact growing plants with lots of flowers. Here's the young growth coming up from the top. This is the stuff that you trim back like so. You see I've taken off a little bit of the top of it here. Of course, all of the old spent flowering stems, and look, nice tight canopy of foliage. Now, as you see, the pruners, or secateurs as we call them in the UK, work pretty good. But if you want to speed things up, and certainly if you have more than one plant, that's when you pull in the heavy artillery, hedge and shears, and you can really speed things up a great deal and still get the job done. As you see, what I'm doing is clipping it into a rounded mound, and that is now going to create lots of young, fresh growth that's going to come up, and this will now start flowering at the end of the summer, early part of the autumn, and it'll give us another round of gorgeous flowers. So in summary, by doing this, you're going to make your plants nice and juvenile. You're going to get repeat flowering on it. You're going to have lots of nice evergreen foliage that's going to look nice during the winter time, and your plants, because they're not going to become old woody lavenders like you sometimes see with plants that have never been trimmed, you're going to have plants that are longer lived too. Now, if you'd like to find out more about the varieties we grow, and in particular the different types that you can grow in your garden, you might like to look through this channel. You'll see there that we've featured some of the best performing varieties, ones that are hardy throughout our region, and ones that are going to give you lots of gorgeous, beautiful, fragrant flowers. And the technique is exactly the same for the stronger growing hybrid varieties that are known as lavadins. You just go in with a hedge and shears or pruners, and like before, just clip off the old flowering heads with a little bit of the growth, making a young, juvenile, bushy plant that's going to grow out and give you lots of fresh young growth and lots of these gorgeous flowers. Now, over a period of time, you might notice that as the plants get older, they become incrementally a little bit bigger, and that's okay. You just keep lots of this young, fresh, colorful growth on here, and that of course is the way to keep them living longer, fresh and juicy, with lots of young, fresh growth and lots of these gorgeous flowers. Now, after you've collected up the trimmings, there's one more little job that I would like to remind you about. Remember how I was talking about them growing in rocky calcareous soils in nature? And that's the pH of your soil. You see, lavenders like it on the limey side, on a calcareous soil, and ideally somewhere between 6.5 and 8. If you test your soil, you'll be able to find out exactly what your pH is. Here on this soil, it's about neutral. So what would be a good idea would be, in springtime is when I usually do it, but now it'll work just as well, is to go through and give them a dressing of dolomitic limestone, just about a handful or so. Just shake it around the perimeter of where the roots are of the plants, and that will sweeten up the soil. The lavenders will love it, and then when it rains, that's going to wash in all the soluble calcium, and your lavenders are going to grow all the better for it. And then just give it a little bit of a rake, and that'll help to mix in the lime with the surrounding soil. If you're going into a prolonged dry period, it wouldn't do any harm to give them a good watering. But generally, once lavenders get established, they're able to cope with the drought conditions really remarkably well. Once they get established, when you put in a young plant, you'll find then that with their little furry leaves, they're able to withstand the sunshine and grow away and make beautiful plants. Now, you might be interested to know that the word lavender is derived from the Latin lavare, means to wash or to bathe, and in turn that led to words like lavatory and laundry, the person who does the washing. Now, the word goes back to ancient times, of course in the Mediterranean, where they had really hot, steamy summer weather. Things probably got a little aromatic when you consider that they didn't have soaps and detergents and deodorants like we have today. Probably more than just a little aromatic. Well, to cope with that, what they did is they washed out their linens and their clothes, and they laid them over the top of their lavender plants, imparted that beautiful fragrance, and made things, of course, a little bit more pleasant. So now you know what you can do with your lavender plants if things get a little on the tight side. This is David Wilson. Enjoy your gardening. It's good for us, and it's very good for our environment too.